For Joe Kye, music was always in the background. He sang in an a cappella group as an undergrad. He wrote songs between his classes while he was a teacher. Even as a baby in South Korea, he was tuned into the music around him.
My first memories are in Korean. My first memory is being on my mom's back and listening to her lullabies with my ear pressed against her shoulder blades. So kind of hearing through the muffling, the warm muffling of her body, the different Korean folk songs and lullabies.
When Joe was 6 years old, he and his family immigrated to the United States. His father got a job at the University of Washington as a teacher's assistant, and Joe accepted his role as the dutiful firstborn son. Eventually, Joe went to college and then became a teacher. And although his career didn't come with the status his parents had hoped for, teaching did provide security he didn't have growing up. Within 2 years of moving from Seoul, Joe's parents had burned through their savings. They lived in the basement of a fellow church member.
We had about a month of eating Big Macs because they were 99 cents. No fries. That's wasteful. And certainly no Happy Meals. Yes. This is all I can do is just laugh at it and talk to my therapist about it.
But Joe's not just laughing and talking to his therapist. He's also telling the world. Today, Joe is a professional performer and storyteller.
I sit all alone in a heap as I wait by the door.
Joe's live shows feel warm and candid, like you're just hanging out with an old friend who happens to have his violin with him. He sings about love and family and candlelit dinners of Spam and ketchup. Mixed in between his songs, he tells stories about his life. Like the time he was interviewing for a board position, it was for a youth orchestra in Portland, Oregon.
And in my board interview, one of the board members, we were about halfway in through the interview, we're joking about this and that, we're sharing our passions, and then he says, wow, you speak really good English. And I'm like, great, so do you.
Joe was a high school English teacher for 4 years. As an undergrad at Yale University, his major was American Studies. But here's the thing. Joe gets tagged as an outsider in Korea, too. He told me a story about shopping there with his mom. Although he hadn't said a word, the Korean shopkeeper nodded to Joe and asked his mom where he was from. The shopkeeper could tell. Joe wasn't one of them.
That's the problem with being bicultural, right, is that you feel like an imposter in both worlds.
Like his Korean-American identity, Joe's music is also layered, literally. He uses a looping pedal to create multiple tracks with his voice and violin in real time. In any one song, he might go from jazz to a cappella to hip-hop. He's like a one-man, multicultural band.
I would say that I'm welcomed in very few purist circles, which is really my curse.
Candlelit dinners filled with Spam and ketchup to the neighbor. Little he knows about the world he left behind. Receiver, hang up the phone.
I asked Joe why he loops, why he doesn't just hire a band. He told me he thinks a lot about what looping represents.
Yeah, it's a way for me to, I think, express myself in totality. Yeah, so to accurately capture some of the tension that exists within myself.
Grandma's house she loved but never knew she had a daughter. If only you could have.
By 2013, part of Joe's internal tension was at its breaking point. He had to finally see if he could make a life out of doing what he loves. His mom was not on board.
At the end of 4 years of teaching, to say, I'm going to do music. I remember saying that to her, and she just glared back at me and said, then why did you go to Yale?
Even without his mom's support, Joe took the leap. 3 years later, Joe was in front of nearly 20,000 people, warming up the crowd for then presidential hopeful Bernie Sanders. He's opened for cellist Yo-Yo Ma as well as rapper Warren G. And after he performed at TEDx Seattle, the crowd filling McCall Hall stood up and cheered. What that means is that these days, Joe spends a lot of time with his story. And during his live shows, you can feel it. That tension, Joe's totality, it hums through the room like electricity. Before he goes on stage, he meditates.
I try to get into this space of, for me, true joy, which I think is just adjacent to suffering. This place where you want to cry and laugh at the same time. I think without that suffering, without that sense of suffering, you don't really know what joy is.
Joe's most requested song exactly captures this contrast. It opens with Joe strumming his violin like a ukulele. Although the song is called Happy Song, the lyrics tell a different story.
You would spend the night alone and cry to sleep upon the kitchen floor.
Happy Song tends to make the audience cry. Joe said those are his on-fire moments, glorious and beautiful.
When I can really touch someone and share in that emotion together, that co-misery, as well as at the end of the song, there's a huge upwelling of strings that to me is synonymous with this joy, this kind of overflowing joy that bubbles up. So when I can get into that space, that tiny little crevice between joy and suffering, and spend some time there with all the people that are listening to it, yeah, that's what I live for.
For KUOW and Transom Traveling Workshop in Seattle, I'm Kristin Leong.